Okay, and we can let people in. Yeah. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is the Edgewalker Cafe on March 14th, 2024. And I am very excited to have as our guest Shadrick Mazaza, who has joined Edgewalkers, I think as we were saying, a couple of years, Shadrick. It's been
Yeah.
that you've been a part of our community, and now we want to put you in the limelight and hear about your story. And not only your story, because story, someone just recently told me that story is about the past, but we're particularly interested in your vision of the future and how people can support that and be a part of it. So we're going to begin with an opening contemplation. And so I invite you to center in whatever way is your normal way of centering, whether it is through the breath or noticing the weight of your body or whatever your particular practice is. And you're welcome to gently close your eyes if you want to. And come to center. And as you are centering, imagine a point of light in your heart. It might be a clear crystal light. It might be a golden light. But whatever that light is for you, really see it and feel it. And now imagine that light in the center of each of the people on this call. And feel your light connect to those points of light in the other members of today's call, weaving these beautiful strands of light. And now imagine those points of light connecting to anyone who has ever thought of themselves as an edge walker or some other similar term that those of us are integrating the spiritual world and the material world. Imagine the points of light in their hearts connecting to the points of light in all of our hearts. Again, weaving this beautiful network of light. And now imagining these collective lights that we're weaving, connecting to collective lights of other organizations like Edgewalkers. There's the Institute of Noetic Sciences. There's Octave Institute in Singapore. There's Fetzer Institute in the United States. There are women nuns praying in Alberta, Canada, and in India. And there are all these groups of people who are collectively connecting their points of light to ours. And one of those points of light is the African Consciousness Institute, which we're especially strengthening our light connection to this organization today. So rest in this net, this interweaving of all these beautiful light streams from heart to heart. And you might even feel a calling to amplify and strengthen that light and brighten it. If you do, feel free to put your energy into that amplification of these light connections. And now, finally, as we get ready to begin our Edgewalker Cafe today, imagine that point of light in your heart connecting to the point of light in Shadrick Mazaza's heart and making that connection beautiful and strong and supporting him as he shares with us today. And whenever you're ready, feel free to open your eyes if you've closed them. Feel free to share your video if you've shut it off for this meditation and join the group. Thank you. Welcome again, everybody. The Edgewalker Cafe on March 14th, 2024. Our special guest is Shadrick Mazaza. And Shadrick is an amazing man. He's a Renaissance man. He's a physician. He is a philosopher. He has been a teacher of the Vedanta. He is a businessman. He is a professor in a business school. And I haven't asked you, but you might even be a dancer. I'm not sure, Shadrick, but you are so rich in all of these paths that you've brought together and integrated to lift collective consciousness in Africa and on the planet. And so we're so happy to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you, Judy. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, glad you're here. And so I'd like to invite you to start with the story of your spiritual path, because it's not a predictable path. You have gone your own way, one might say, of following the spiritual threads, and you continue to grow and explore. And so, what would you like to share about that with us?
I think briefly, I set out in my education as a scientist in a way. I did physics and biology, BSc degree. And because of those two subjects, I also had to take mathematics and chemistry. At that point, I had more or less in my mind, I was doing the science to become a doctor. At least that's what almost all my teachers said, that's where I should be heading. But I remember that when I was studying for my first degree, there was a professor of philosophy who, in the orientation week, was giving talks about philosophy, and I was so immersed in how he appeared to have this knowledge about how life works. And I wanted to do philosophy as well, but I couldn't. I wasn't allowed to. I couldn't do 5 subjects. So I went on to become a doctor. I finished in, doing my medical degree in Manchester, and then came back to Cape Town. Still in my mind, I had like a void. One day I must study philosophy so I can understand things beyond the science that I knew and the medical science that we have also that I had received. So that's how it started. And then one day when I was working in my practice, I saw an advert for evening classes in practical philosophy. And I thought, yes, I must go and do this, expecting Plato and Socrates and all of that. But when I got there, it is a school which integrated Eastern philosophies, particularly Vedantic philosophy and Western philosophies. I remember the first thing when I arrived there, we're sitting in a circle and said, let's come to rest. And I was going, what's going on here? I'm not coming back. But I did go back a week later. And then I was in that school after that for 10 years, rising in the ranks from junior to senior school. And I was a tutor by the time I, sort of stopped going to the school. And that's how my spiritual journey started. I wasn't looking for it. But the moment I was introduced to it, I knew this is where I belong. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, so that thing, that emptiness that was in your heart that was calling you, got fulfilled by this, what was supposedly philosophical, but it turned out to be philosophical and spiritual studies, and then becoming a teacher, which in my experience, those of us who really want to learn become teachers so we can go even deeper to learn more. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that's what it was for you. So
Yes.
you also have taught in business schools, which is very different from this school that was so deeply immersed in spiritual path and spiritual practice. How did you make a leap? Did you transition from one to another? Did you do both? How did that work for you? And what are you actually doing now in terms of your teaching?
Yeah, that's also an interesting part in the sense that after about 10 years or so in the School of Philosophy, and I was in my medical practice, one of the major insurance companies in South Africa approached me to join their organization as a director in one of their divisions, the healthcare management division. And I said, well, that's fine. As a non-executive director, I'll continue in my practice. But they had a plan. Within 6 months, they really talked me out of my practice to go and join them permanently as a director. And after a year, they obviously realized they got themselves a physician who knows absolutely nothing about management or leadership. And so they sent me to a business school to study executive leadership. And that's how that started. So I went to, while I was in corporate, to business school. And I remember the first module of that business school. The heading was Leadership Starts with the Self. And I was surprised at first. Do they know about spiritual nature of us as individuals? I mean, for me, I'd spent 10 years deepening my understanding of the self, not this body-mind self, but the true self, behind this self. And so I thought that's what they were talking about. And I was very excited, only to find when the course started, the self they were talking about was largely ego self. Um, and But still, I thought in my mind that I would like to come back to this business school and introduce real wisdom and real exploration of the true self. And that's what happened. So I went back after I graduated, went back to corporate. I didn't stay very long. I didn't like it before, and even less after having done the study. And I resigned from corporate without any sort of knowledge of what I was going to do. I just resigned. I must do something combined. At that point, my focus was I need to combine my knowledge of medicine and my knowledge of management and leadership to do something so that I can facilitate not just physical health in the individuals, but also psychological health. And I was convinced that the exploration of the true self, the essence, is what is required for leadership development, because you can't change behavior superficially, which is what we all do. Medical business schools do the same to try and change management abilities of individuals superficially. I thought, well, you must start from where the behavior comes from,
Oh, it
deep
looks like
within an
everyone
individual.
has frozen.
It seems, yes. We back now?
We're
Yes.
back. I'm sorry. And it looks like it was my internet that's unstable. My apologies. But
That's
we're
all right.
back.
Okay, so that's what happened, and from then on, Judy, things started just moving in my. As I left the corporate with that in mind, and I say to myself, I remember writing down. I had reached a point now of writing down my vision and my mission and my purpose, what really, sort of resonates with me the most. And I wrote down that one of the things I said, I'm only a physician. What I'm setting out to do, I want to engage with people, to talk, in public and to talk to individuals, I need to find ways of developing my lecturing ability, I call it.
Mhm.
So within 6 weeks, I got a call from one of the professors at the business school telling me there's a new post coming at the business school. We want to employ a physician, well, a doctor to teach healthcare management and leadership. But we want that person to also be able to coach and mentor executives in the, in Department of Health in South Africa. And I thought about you that as a physician and what we do. Will you be interested? Of course, I was interested. So that's what happened. I applied for that job. I got that job, and with an agenda, obviously, which they did know. My agenda was, here's my chance to introduce wisdom, practical wisdom, in the teaching of management and leadership. I didn't know how, but I thought, well, I'll teach them, which is what I did. I teach them exercises, centering exercises, connecting with the cell, with the senses, and of course, meditation, because I was by then a facilitator in meditation. And so that's how I started my career, academic career. And I remember the first day, what came to my mind with the class was, I'm going to teach consciousness and personal transformation for the life of business and the business of life. I put that slide up, and that was enough to start a conversation.
I'll bet it
Them
was.
challenging me, what are you talking about consciousness? So that's how it started, Judi.
Wow, that is so amazing. It's like a totally unpredictable path. But the key point in your story that really touches me is knowing you did not like the corporate life. It was not right for you. Trusting you had this inner calling, and you let go of what you had. And that created the space for that call 6 weeks later with the perfect job.
Mm-hmm.
It was like designed for you. And
Yeah.
and for you to be able to have impact on these students and on these executives and on these companies and feel like you're fulfilling your own purpose. But your
Yeah.
purpose has expanded since then. So tell us more about that and about the vision for Africa, or unless there's someplace you want to go before we get to the African Consciousness Institute. There...
No, that's okay. Yes, I think the African Consciousness Institute was virtually an extension of that. The only thing I must mention is, obviously, for a year or two or so, it was pretty rough. The other professors there just didn't like me. There was one professor of leadership who really invited me for a coffee and said, you keep going on about consciousness in this business school. You can't mention that word in a prestigious business school like this one. It's the #1 business school on the African continent. If you don't stop it, you'll be kicked out of the business school.
Oh, I think I'm
But
frozen
as things
again.
turn out, there was a point when
Judy's frozen, but we aren't.
Oh, okay. I'm not frozen now. I'm so sorry. We're under a threat, severe tornado and hail threat that might be affecting the internet, and so I apologize, but we'll keep on keeping on. So I'm sorry.
the only other story that is worth mentioning, again, talking about how things just work out. Under that pressure, I was forced, I decided to quit. I said, okay, that's enough. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go and start an organization somewhere where I can combine these two passions. And as it turns out, the business school, we got a new dean from Belgium who just arrived. And so like all new deans, he was inviting all the academics to find out what they were doing and etc., where they're going with their research and whatever. So he invited me to go and talk to him. And by then I had already, so shall I go see him or just leave it? Because I'm leaving. And I had a resignation letter in my pocket. So I went to see him. And again, surprisingly, so he says, okay, what is it that you do here? And I was free to talk to him in a way I like because I was leaving. So I said to him, well, I'm a physician. I came here after, integrating Eastern and Western philosophies dedicated to introducing the business school consciousness and personal transformation. And he says, yes. I said, yes. Thinking, he was going to say, what is that about? Get out of here. But so he gets up, he says, wow, I didn't know South Africa had academics like you. This is cutting edge stuff. So what books and what are you following? So I told him. He walks to the shelf, he pulls out a book, he says, have you read this book? I said, no, you take it. And oh, by the way, he says, and I'm sitting there, what is going on here? He phones his wife. He says, my wife would like to meet you because he's into mental health. And so he phones his wife, says, I've got Shadrick Mazaza here, an academic at the business school. I think I ought to arrange for you to have dinner with him. He puts the phone down, he says, oh, by the way, from now on, I was just teaching that in healthcare management. He says, from now on, I want you to teach personal transformation in all the academic programs. Postgraduate diploma, MBA, executive MBA. I was sitting there now thinking, oh, you're going too far with this, in my own mind. But that's also what happened. So I had to tear up my resignation letter. And he supported me. From then on, it was like fire, underneath for me to just rise. I was free to put together what I wanted to do with consciousness and personal transformation. So it was another step with him when he came.
How do you explain that spiritually?
The way most of these things, you understand them looking backwards, as you know. When they are happening, you say, okay, this is some kind of synchronicity. But when you look back, you can see the pattern, that it's actually very predictable, it should be. And the way I looked at it is the fact that when I really made up my mind, and I remember the day I wrote down that I want to combine my knowledge as a physician and philosophy and to teach personal transformation, I had virtually made a declaration. I didn't think about it that way then. And then, as I know now, when you make that declaration and you are certain about it, the universe brings you what you need to keep going in the direction. That's the only way I can explain it.
I don't know if you're seeing the chat, but Monica Ross said, wow, that is some powerful manifestation capacity. And Monica and I were talking just a couple of days ago, and almost all our conversation was about the power of declaration. And your story just really underscores the reality and the power of that. So,
yes.
So really appreciate hearing that. For those of us who come to like forks in the road or dead ends in the road and we wonder, oh, what's next? Your story can really remind us to go deep within and get that sense of what our calling is and let go of things. Be willing to quit, to be fired, to go into the emptiness. You've done that several times, and then the miracles happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's just
and
so
then
charming.
Go on. And then about the African Consciousness Institute, more or less the same. After several years, by then the course had really got traction. It was becoming one of the popular courses with students. And then I was saying to myself, I need to take this outside academia to the wider world. So I was thinking, how do I do this? Do I start a nonprofit or how do I do it? And then one day I saw in a newspaper here in Cape Town about Agenda 2063, which is the agenda of the African Union. The African Union is the organization that's trying to integrate all the countries on the African continent to form one amalgamation of African states. I didn't know about this until I saw that article and I looked out on the website, and there I saw the whole plan, strategic plan of where the development is going to go from 2013 when that was done. This was 2014 when I saw it. And I read the vision for the continent, and they made like a challenge to all Africans to read the document and decide how you are going to contribute to this. And I remember immediately after that, I said, I know what I'm going to do. The challenge of this vision is the fact that to integrate 54 countries as diverse as African countries are, integrating the borders is the easy part. Integrating the economies is the easy part. Integrating the judicial system is the easy part. Integrating the mindsets of Africans to have an African identity, or even beyond that, a human identity, is what is going to be required. And so I remember myself, I was sitting here, I think it was, I said, okay, I'm raising my hand. I am going to introduce consciousness and personal transformation as the one thing that's required for Africa to be able to realize this Agenda 2063. And so I set about doing that. In 2015, I formed African Consciousness Institute, which I said was what was as a vehicle to introduce the three transformations that all over Africans, or at least as many Africans as possible. And first is personal transformation. Second is interpersonal transformation. And the third is obviously social economic transformation. But the most important one is personal transformation. And that's how the African Consciousness Institute started.
And so tell us about, well, like you and I have been talking about this proposal that you're putting together to get not only funding, but approval to have a direct connection with the university and to expand beyond that. So say more now about your vision and anything that you want to say about how the Edgewater community can help you, and the Global Consciousness Institute. How can these organizations and these communities support this vision? Because I sort of sense in this whole group like the hairs are going up on everybody's arms in excitement for this vision of unity of African consciousness and human consciousness. So, yeah, where do you go from here, and what do you need?
I think what is required has already started happening. and it started when I got in touch with you, Judi. Because I mean, before that, I've said that to you. I thought, I was doing this. I was the first person to think about integrating science and philosophy, science and spirituality, and so on. I thought, well, I was a trailblazer, but obviously not. The next step is actually when I contacted you, when your book came, personal transformation, personal and organizational transformation. I'd never seen a book that actually talked about personal transformation that I had been doing for years. Not a little. So, and then because when I ordered this on Amazon, they sent me only one of the 2 volumes. And I said, there's something wrong here. There's supposed to be 2. So I emailed you to say, I just want to clarify this. Am I supposed to have 2 volumes? And, and you said, yeah, 2 volumes. Get in touch with them to give you the other volume. But cut a long story short, through that, and then I got introduced to the Edgewater. You invited me, and it took some time.
I'm frozen again.
Yeah.
Okay, unfreeze. Okay, it looks like we unfroze. So when this happens, you just keep talking because it's recording.
Okay, all right.
Don't worry if I blinked into hyperspace for a little while. I'm walking between worlds. You just keep talking and sharing. So that's very beautiful. Yes. So you found the personal and organizational transformation book. You began to realize you were part of something bigger that
Yes.
we all are feeling interconnected into. By the way, Louis Griggs is here, who's from the Conscious Leadership Guild. which is another community of like-minded people. And Lewis has been very active in Edgewalkers as well. And so there's all these interconnections that, it's whatever this is, it's moving in hundreds or thousands of us. We don't even know, but our goal is to find each other. And it's exciting. Yeah.
That's right. And obviously, the next step is even more profound of recent, that you and I have been, engaging. And then one day, I can't even remember how that happened. Then I got invited to participate in Global Consciousness Institute. And I'm going, Global Consciousness Institute? You may have mentioned it before, but at that time I said, well, now I'm at home. My vision was obviously is Africa and the African continent, but to know that there's also a Global Consciousness Institute was very, very inspiring, saying, well, then I'm not really that lonely in what I'm trying to do. And then we engaged, and then you go to find out more about what my thoughts are about the African Consciousness Institute, what I want to do. Because up until now, it's been I teach personal transformation at a business school, and that's going brilliantly well. And I teach that in other universities as well. But at the same time, there is obviously, I would like to, what I wanted to do is the African Consciousness Institute to be an entity dedicated to the transformations that I talk about, starting with personal transformation. And when I had conversations with other people, for the sake of time, I won't go into that detail. Someone suggested that you must form this organization, get, if you can, to link it with an academic institution, either the one you're in or another institution, to really take this to the vision that you have. And that's what I'm working on at the moment.
So, and say more about your work with youth and why that's important.
Yeah. Yes. Right from the beginning, because when I set out to start consciousness and personal transformation, particularly when I came across the Agenda 2060 of the African Union, it became clear to me that what is required is to raise the level of consciousness of as many people as possible. I became convinced in my explorations to say that we have problems and issues, even including wars and stress and all of this. Actually, the true answer to any of those is to raise our level of consciousness. Because as we do, they become less of issues. Most of the issues are because of our identification with our ego selves and personality selves. As soon as we raise our level of consciousness and disidentify or identify less with that, we are moving from the polarities of pleasure and pain, support and challenge, positive and negative, and pride and shame, and infatuations and resentments. We are moving into the unification. We're now being guided and directed to run our lives from our higher ideals. The executive center, as the psychologists now call it, the medial prefrontal cortex of the brain. This is like, it's the unification of all the polarities in the world of the senses. So I became convinced that the more we raise the level of consciousness of individuals, the less most these intractable problems become that intractable. And I remember one of the, maybe I didn't mention this before, Judi, when I first started at a business school, one of the things I learned from the great teachers that I took with me was an expression by Harry Benjamin. In fact, I built everything on it. He had a little equation which said the level of knowledge plus level of being, which is level of consciousnness, equals level of understanding, which is wisdom. And that's what I use with the student all the time. I put it up here. You come to the business school, you learn it, you raise your level of knowledge, but that won't be enough for you to get wise. You need to raise your level of consciousness for you to become wise. And so that's the theme, literally, for me. And for children, I mean, this comes up over and over again. When I talk to people, say, we wish we knew about this when we were young. And And I said that when I came across it myself. And so I know that what we're trying to do, whether it's in the African continent or globally, what is required, if we can introduce this to more and more of the young people, so that they get something that we got later, much earlier, I'm sure that will make a big difference in society. And someone put it, which I still like, it says, to give them wisdom of the ages without the aging process.
Yeah, have more of their life being lived in wisdom and through wise leadership. So a longer period of time instead of waiting until middle age or elderly with, wise being. So they can contribute greater in their lifespan, but also it becomes more of the community ethos, the collective way of being, which gets to what you were saying about wars, and we could talk about climate change and all of the other things, the pandemic, all of the things that make us so interdependent. If you're wise earlier and have that consciousness of oneness instead of the consciousness of separation, then it lifts everything. Well, I know there's lots of comments in the chat and that there's people who have questions. And so is there anything else you want to share before I open it up for questions? And Christine, I'm going to give you a heads up because of your comment about Cape Town, in case there's something you want to share. But Shadrick, anything else you want to share before we open it up to the rest of our friends here?
Just to mention that of late I've been inspired because all along I was saying we need to raise the level of consciousness of a critical mass of Africans to get where you are. Then I heard from someone who says, well, you don't even need that critical mass. You just need some yeast. It doesn't need that. It doesn't need to be that much. It hasn't left my head. Okay, it's yeast we need.
I'm so glad that was helpful to you, to our participants and the people watching the recording. What Shadrick's talking about is a book called The Moral Imagination by Paul Lederick. And there's a chapter in there that's called Critical Yeast, and it's about social change. And it says instead of critical mass, which would be 10 to 15% of a population, you need only critical yeast, like that small amount of yeast in a loaf of bread that you're baking. You don't need very much, but it gives life to that just inert dough and water and maybe sugar or honey or whatever you put in your bread. Without the yeast, there's no life, but there is leadership in critical small numbers of people, like Margaret Wheatley said. Not Margaret Wheatley. Nothing ever happens without a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens. Margaret Mead.
Mead, yeah.
Thoughtful, committed citizens. And so that's really more critical yeast. The right people and all the voices, don't leave anybody out, but the right people who really are passionate and really called. You don't need huge numbers. You just need the leverage that they bring. And so that makes our collective work so much easier. That chapter is very inspirational, and you can download the book for free if you look up Moral Imagination. So that's and buy it. Actually, you should buy it if you can, because you want to support the very wise author. But yeah, critical yeast, that's what we are. That's what the other organizations are that we're connecting to. And so we keep putting ourselves out there and sharing what we see and learning and growing. We do it together. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Christine, you said something about an experience in Cape Town, and I wondered if you wanted to share that with Shadrick.
Yeah, hi everybody. Hi, Shadrick.
Christine's still here.
Hi.
Hi. It's just amazing to hear about your work. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Cape Town has been a really important place to me. I found myself very burnt out at the age of 25, and I decided to take an invitation to live in Cape Town for a year. And is the first place that I learned about my Clifton strengths or strengths finder. Strengths was there, and it just completely changed my life, and it's still with me today and very much infused in the work that I do. Which is really cool to hear you talk about like physics as well, and kind of the bridge with Eastern and Western practices. Because my work is also kind of informed and inspired by a law of physics, and just the way that people can get like grounded in nature and grounded with themselves is, I believe, the path to more collective freedom and flourishing. And I'm just feeling very inspired, and this synchronicity feels important and exciting too. So yeah, I guess I don't have a question. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
So the floor is open to anyone who has a question, a comment. And please raise your hand or just jump in.
Shadrick, I'm Louis Griggs, and I'm in Berkeley, California, and I'm sure that everyone feels the same way I do now, which is there's nothing I can say that can possibly match the wisdom and the consciousness with which you just shared. So do we dare open our mouth? What a treat. And I also, one of my best times of learning was in Cape Town. For 10 years, I was married to a South African who had been educating children in garages all before the election about math and engineering, because she had been educated the way they hadn't. And I learned a level of consciousness so deep that she and I learned with her to teach corporations in South Africa and every organization that the goal was not just to maximize profits. The goal was to educate and raise the consciousness of every employee and every child of every employee. There's no American diversity group or organization that has ever gone that deeply. And so the consciousness of the heart of what I experienced in South Africa was so profound that every time I hear your voice, I just remember, I don't just hear and understand you, I feel you. And what a gift you are to model this with all of us. That's all. Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing. One of the
Thank you,
things
Louis.
that I have said myself in the past is I
I'm
lived in
frozen
Manchester
again.
in the UK for 13 years and then came back to South Africa to find this school. And I look back and said, of all the places, my spirituality, I got it here. And just, around apartheid and all of that. So it's Cape Town itself has a community, a very spiritual community. And it was of benefit, for me to associate with that group of individuals in Cape Town. And by the way, as you know, the wisdom that I am talking about is not an acquisition. It's at the core of every human being. Each one of us, without exception, are that wisdom. We think ourselves out of it.
Could you please hand some of that to Putin and Hamas and Israel and Middle East and all the rest of us, especially us males on this earth, who need to be released from our ego into our oneness? Ugh.
It's needed there. There's no doubt about that.
So Dave Fearon, you have your hand up, and then Paul.
Hi. I've been, after I retired from business school, a little bit jaded, a lot jaded. I connected with my former teacher and mentor, Peter Vale, who wrote several books, all of which dealt with spirit, as Judi knows, as his colleague too. And since then, I've been trying over and over and over again in every way to say that practice is a way of being. And you use the word being. So just by wonderful coincidence, the way this all works, I decided recently, since my long tropes were not really getting read too much on LinkedIn and all of our other media, I said, I'm going to do something called Wait a Minute. And I'm going to limit myself to a minute, which is excruciatingly tough. A minute. So today I finished recording one called, wait a minute, you want to know what practice is? Picture a bouquet. You go over and you touch it, and it's artificial. It's not real. Now, picture another bouquet, and now you're thinking, oh gosh, another artificial bouquet. Feel it and feel that blossom. It's alive. It's got energy. It's got life. Now that is the difference between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. We're real. We've got life. That may change because it's not as permanent as the artificial, but we can do the changing. So I did all that in a minute. But now, having heard this today, sir, I'm no longer jaded. I lamented the fact that I rarely had a dean or a president who felt that way about my efforts to be different in the school's business. But I'm fortunate, you're very fortunate to have that Belgian dean who came in and found you in the nick of time with a resignation in your pocket. So thank you.
No, thank you for sharing that. Incidentally, you talked about impermanence and permanence.
Yes.
What we obviously see as impermanent is not our true nature. Our true nature and life, those are permanent. Those are eternal. They have no beginning and no end. It's only in our perceptions. Our mind is what creates the ephemeral, which obviously they are not permanent.
Yeah, thank you.
We are permanence itself in person, in our essence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Paul and then Matt. And then I have some announcements.
I'm excited about the networking process that's going on. Recently, I participated in the Awakening to Humanity's Sacred Mission, derivation of Ervin Laszlo's work, and wondering if you're connected to that. Because there were participants in that program from Africa. And I've been tinkering around with other ones, and I'm working on setting up a spiritual living circle here where I'm at. I'm out kind of in the middle of nowhere, in the Western United States, and there's nothing out here. So this whole networking process on the web is exciting and uplifting and encouraging. Thank you.
Thank you. The answer is no, I haven't been involved in that organization that you mentioned.
But you have been connected to Ervin's son, Chris Laszlo.
Oh, yes.
And that connection led to your connection to Octave Institute in China. And you'll be going to China to speak on a panel in next month, isn't it? Next month.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and the Octave Institute is also the #1 sponsor of the Laszlo Institute, Ervin Laszlo's work. So while you're there, there probably will be people from Laszlo Institute that you should be looking to connect with.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Matt.
Hi, Shadrick, I had a question for you. I live in Asheville, North Carolina right now, and one of the most influential people in this area spiritually is a West African elder, now passed, Malidoma Somé. And I'm wondering, I think those of us here in the States, we have a lot of influence from the East, Asia, India, and I don't think that we are as schooled in the wisdom of Africa. And I'm reading Malidoma's book right now. It's called The Healing Wisdom of Africa. So a couple of questions. One, what do you think African wisdom, I mean, it's kind of a silly question, but offers us that maybe we might not be getting from further east? And how best to adopt that here in the States? And the last question is, there's a book out called Leader as Healer. And I'm wondering if you're at all familiar with that book, Leader as Healer. So thank you.
No, thank you for that question. No, I'm aware of the book you mentioned. I haven't read it. I'm also very familiar with the work of Somé. To answer your question, one of the funny things that, oh, by the way, when I teach at the business school, sometimes one student would say, oh, that was great, but shouldn't you be teaching African leadership? Okay. Yeah, but what I want to say to answer your question is one of the things that I discovered when I set out, as I said before, I'm very, Western scientist mindset. And then I was introduced to Eastern philosophies, Vedanta and Buddhism and Chinese philosophy. And when I looked at people who have actually looked at both, it's amazing how the integration of these philosophies is very, very profound. You get more clarity when you combine the two, and you get convinced that actually it's not two, it's one. Expressed differently, it's the same thing. And I like the Vedantic philosophy when they talk Advaita, which means not two. It's one. It's not two. One without a second, they call it in Vedanta. But one thing that I discovered, by the way, when I was doing the work looking at East and Western philosophies, then I came across ancient Hermetic philosophy. The Hermetic philosophy, which speak of, Hermes or Thoth, as the ancient Egyptians called him, thrice great. When you study that, which I am busy doing more than the other things now, you see the connection between that and Eastern philosophies and Western philosophies. In fact, it's even more enlightening when you look at how the three so-called Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and you put the ancient Egyptian text, you find that they actually are talking the same thing. So now when I talk that I am looking at Eastern and Western, I say Eastern, Western, and Southern philosophies. If one thinks about it, if the first man walked out of Africa to the rest of the world, it's not surprising that you find that similarity. It's the same African who walked out of the continent, who also, discovered or cultivated the understanding according to the culture in the region where they ended up. But it's one. In fact, it's so exciting when you see the oneness of all these teachings, and you find all these differences are nonsense. We are one. One philosophy, if you can call it that, expressed as it should in different cultures, the way it has been expressed. It's very liberating.
So Matt, you had your hand up again, and then we'll need to start winding down, sadly, because this is so rich. But go ahead, Matt. Oh, no, okay, all right. All right, so Shadrick, I'll be thanking you in a minute, but I want to share we have some announcements. Several of the people on this call are certified Edgewalker facilitators, and they have different offerings. And so I want to call on them to share with you all the different ways you could be more involved in the Edgewalker community and be able to interact with amazing, wise people like Shadrick and the others on this call. So Monica, would you like to share what you're planning for this summer in Ireland?
Thank you. So I am committed to creating a retreat space for edge walkers from anywhere in the world or the planet to come together. And my intention is that I love the phrase critical yeast, because it's to bring a small group of 8 people together. I'm thinking very much of the infinity and the lemniscate sign, the energy of that. To bring this group of critical yeast edge walkers together to share and blend our skills and qualities, or qualities and skills as edge walkers, to embody them and to create an energetic network that long after the retreat is over, we will resonate out into the world, and we will continue to support each other through deep practice. So during the retreat, we will design and co-design practices that we will continue to support each other with long after the retreat is over, so that we fully embody and live what it is to be an edge walker and our purpose as edge walkers. I live in a tiny little spot by the sea in Ireland. I call it my sweet spot of the universe. The sea is just outside my door, the Atlantic. So that's the invitation. Thanks, Judi.
Thank you, Monica. And we'll be including information in the Edgewalker newsletter. And so you can go to edgewalkers.org to sign up for the newsletter and to get information on the Edgewalker cafes and the various events. Speaking of Edgewalker Cafe, the next Edgewalker Cafe is April 25th, and Amy Lynn Durham is going to be leading that, and we'll be announcing more. Is Amy on the call? I don't think I've seen Amy. So we'll be sharing more about the Edgewalker Cafe coming up April 25th. And Amy Bernstein, you have a program that you have offered through Edgewalkers in the past and are planning to do something again. So please share about Roar of the Moor.
Oh, thank you, Judi. Yeah, the Roar of the Moor, and I call it Roar of the Moor because I sense that that's the impulse that is changing the world, a new vibration that is energetically higher frequency that's affecting all of us. But for some of us who resonate deeply and want to really move with this evolutionary impulse, I created the Roar of the Moor, which is a mind-body energy evolving leader training and coaching series, 8-week series. And in my experience, I've trained in Aikido, the energy principles and practices of Aikido for 40 years. I'm not much of a martial artist, but I love how the principles actually translate into the real world, the material world as well. So this is for edge walkers. And what we do is we enhance self-awareness using the Enneagram, NLP, looking at limited mindsets, how to break through those, the stages of transitions. And then I teach an inner map and embodied practices to enhance well-being, relationships, creativity, performance, while raising states of consciousness. And we've all been talking about raising states of consciousness. For me, what that means is being able to function from a finer dimension, maybe not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time, so that the extraordinary becomes usual for us, and that is in that other dimension, that is the finer vibrations of the true self. But I'm no Christ or Buddha, so I am not at that level. What I know is just let's take it inch by inch. So this program takes the self-awareness, the embodiment work to create the transformation. And at the end, what I do is I teach you how to shift to the finer dimension in minutes. So I'm starting this, I'm doing another program April 2nd, which is Tuesday. If any of you are interested, you can go to www.openmindadventures.com and you'll see more information about the Roar of the Moor. So thank you. And thank you, Judi. Oh, Judi
Thank
went through it. She
Yes,
went through
yes.
it.
Yes, I went through it and it's very profound. It's definitely worth doing. Amy, you're wonderful. Thank you. So another announcement is Kristen Ekins, who's again another Edgewalker facilitator, and Kristen's not here. Kristen is offering a maybe it's multi-dimensional experience of the Santiago de Compostela pilgrimage that will be walking on your leading edge, and it will be virtual over from May through September. And then for a smaller group of the people who participate in the virtual program, they will actually be able to choose to go to Spain and have, I think it's an 11-day experience of walking the Santiago de Compostela as edgewalkers, really experiencing together, walking the edge between the material and the spiritual world, which the Santiago de Compostela has been there for centuries for people to do. So that's again another offering. And Shadrick, do you have any offerings? Is there anything you want people to know, and especially how they can follow up with you, or the courses you might be offering? I know you're talking to Sally, who's also part of our Edgewalker community, about doing some courses online. By the way, when we say Edgewalker community, there's no membership fee to join. All you have to do is feel like you're an Edgewalker, or you would like to be walking more on your leading edge. If you feel that way, you are a member of this community. It's very open, inclusive, and welcoming. So Shadrick, anything that you want to share, that you want to invite people to, and any last words of wisdom for us?
Yeah, apart from the work I do at the business school and of course the institute, I do my private work through an academy. It's the Mazaza Academy of Transformation. And largely I focus on keynote transformative speeches, but more importantly, coaching arrangements. I do a lot more of that, and it's virtually, I call them transformative conversations, where we go deeper into the understanding of who we are. Two things that I, sort of all my sort of teaching and coaching is that, I don't know where I heard this from, but that there are only two things that every human being, if they had a profound embodied understanding of those two things, their life is going to change. First is to know their true self as opposed to who they think they are. And the second is to understand where feelings and experiences come from. So I have conversations in all areas of life, but we'll be coming back to those two things.
It's so beautiful to keep it so simple. Okay. So Shadrick, thank you so much. First of all, for being curious about transformation and finding me and joining the Edgewalker community, and especially for this deeper dive into your wisdom, into your vision for Africa and for the world, and your presence, your beautiful presence. We have loved being with you today, and I'm sure several people are going to be reaching out to you, and your world is expanding, my friend, and we need you.
Thank you very much, Judi. I appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye, everybody. And Shadrick, please stay on for just a moment after I stop the recording.